That was the conservation story of my grandparents and my parents. This tree right here, this is my conservation story.
I love
This is
that.
our conservation story.
So you guys have been doing your work with the foundation for about 20 years. Is that what you said?
Getting close, yes.
And what kind of things, at this point now, you have all these pockets and groves kind of throughout the Ozarks that you've either been told about, you found, people in the foundation have found. And is the main focus right now just the pollinating and sending out the seeds? Is that kind of what you spend 90% of your time doing? Or are there other research efforts that you guys are focused on?
Oh, good question. Well, we're certainly doing a lot of that. We'll ask willing landowners, will you let us collect pollen and nuts? If they don't want us doing that, it's fine. That is your property. You have that right. But if you're willing, oh my gosh, we would love to send somebody out and collect pollen, or even take some pollen and put it on your tree. And then we'll put a bag over that so we know that it doesn't get pollinated with something else. We're going to collect those seeds, grow them in an orchard, let you grow some of them. And we're going to use that to, again, get more of that genetic diversity, but also maximize that blight resistance.
So someone who's got one, they don't need to be shy about like, oh, well, if I tell them I have this tree, they're going to implement some plan that now I have to do this and let them onto my property at any time.
That is not the case.
Okay.
We want to make sure that we are welcomed and we are honored guests, and that is as far as we're willing to go. We're not going to. We can give you advice on how to treat the tree,
Sure.
how to manage for it, and what kind of things we could do with it.
Yeah.
But if your answer is nope, I don't want to be a part of that, we respect that.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's great to hear, because I think some people think like, well, if I'm going to get somebody else involved, they're going to tell me what to do, and now I've got to do this plan. So it's good to hear that.
Yeah.
So if someone does it, so you're saying that you could help them pollinate. What other kind of research things do you guys do?
Okay, we are looking at some of the blight resistance, and we've also looked at some trees that have died. For example, we had one at Hobbs State Park down there in Arkansas where the tree had died due to drought, and some volunteers went out and they started, like an archaeologist, digging around this thing to look at the roots to see what killed it, what does it look like. We discovered something we didn't know anything about. Most trees have a single taproot, to my knowledge. There may be a forester out there that says, now wait a minute, not every tree does this. But as far as I know, one taproot and all the rest are lateral. This Ozark Chinquapin had about maybe 6 to a dozen taproots.
Really?
So the lateral roots would grow out so far and then send down a taproot, which is probably an indication of how they survive drought.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know what happens when they get to be a really big tree, because I know that a lot of your taproots are good for about 10 years. And then, for example, an ash tree or a pine or something, they're not going to necessarily have that taproot. It's now the lateral roots that do most of the work for the tree. So that was very interesting to see. Okay, we didn't know that happened. We don't really fully understand what's going on. We are looking at the pollination. We are looking at guilds of who's on this and who actually touches the female flower. A lot of insects spend time on the male catkins or the flowers, but we don't see a whole lot of animals then go around, insects in particular, go over and touch the female flowers. So who's doing the pollination? Now, we can say that the insects are definitely involved, because when we exclude them with wire mesh, the pollination drops. Or if we exclude wind, the pollination drops. But when you let insects and insects and wind both affect the flowers, maximized pollination. So we know that it's important. So the question is who and when. And at first we were thinking, let's look at the daytime, and then someone made a reference to me about white flowers and nighttime pollination. Well, I guess we need to start taking a look at that. We're also looking at blight resistance and comparing that to American chestnuts, Chinese chestnuts, and all of these different chinkapins. Now, we'll look at chinkapins that blight, we'll look at chinkapins that are doing well, and we're looking at some that we have bred. And so we're making sure that what we have in our orchards is something that when we send that out to the Ozark Chinquapin Foundation members, they are getting very good genetic seed that has the best chance of blight resistance. No guarantees they're going to live, no guarantees that you're not going to have something happen, but that's one of the benefits of being a member every year. Each year, we give seed out to active members in the winter. So we collect the seed, we put it in peat moss, we kind of nurture it along, and then when we think it's good weather and it's not going to freeze, it goes to your mailbox.
For someone who is planting it, you talked about kind of watering them. How do you know if the chinkapin that you've planted is doing well and is getting enough water What are you looking for when you're kind of getting them through that first initial stage where they're a little bit more vulnerable?
First, let me say it's a lot of anxiety.
Is it?
Yeah, because you've got this tree that you really want to grow.
Yeah.
You did not join this foundation to see your seeds die.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get a drought and you go on vacation, or you've got some beetle that comes along and your tree is this big and it's 2 years old. It's only 6 inches tall. What's the deal? It happens, and you've got to have kind of a long view of this. You're not going to get 5 seeds the first year and grow a Chinquapin orchard and just everything's roses. You have to say, all right, I'm going to plant them this year. I'm going to be a member next year, and I'm going to plant them again. And I'm probably going to have to replant this one because a vole got in there and started eating the bark and killed that tree, or a buck rubbed one. Or you're going to have the same problem that any other forester or farmer has. There's nature all around you, and it's unpredictable, and it doesn't necessarily help you do your job.
Yeah.
So then I say, okay, so there's some things you're going to need to do. Use a grow tube. That helps a lot. It keeps the insects off at the base. It keeps the rodents off at the base, and they're not going to get any kind of damage there for a long time. After the tree gets up out of the tube, I leave the tube on, and I pull the stake. Like, I'll have a electric fence post. That's what I use, but I know a lot of people use rebar. Take that off so it doesn't grow into the roots. And bucks won't rub on that, or if they do, they're not going to damage the trunk. I can't tell you how many trees I've planted without a tree tube, like an oak or a pine, and they just rub the dickens out of it, and the next thing you know, I'm replanting that particular tree. Well, using that grow tube really helps, so that's helping me quite a bit. I'm going to look at the leaves. I'm going to look to see, are bugs eating it? Well, I'm going to look at maybe some kind of a natural organic spray that I can put on there and keep the bugs from eating on the leaves for at least while it's in the tube, or shortly after it gets out. After it gets 20 feet tall, it's part of nature.
Okay.
I'm going to look at color. If it's been a really wet summer, it might be in bad shape because of that. I've seen some leaves turn yellow, and they're obviously getting a little too much water. That's a tough one to solve. It's one of those where I think farmers pray a lot, and that's probably one of the best options there. But if it's drought and you see the leaves are starting to shrivel and they're turning brown, okay, you definitely need to provide these trees with some water and help them along in that regard. So there's just some things that you can do, and there's some things that you don't have any control over, and it's just part of it. And I can tell you that I've been growing Chinquapins for a while, and there's days I go out there and think, oh, come on, guys. Do you really have to eat on this? Do you have to get up on your haunches and eat these leaves? Come on, the tree's not more than 8 feet tall. So it's part of it. And to me, it's also kind of rewarding when I finally get past some of those stages and I get a tree that's actually blooming and it's producing nuts.
I'm sure in some ways it's like raising a child. You're like, there's these milestones, and you're like, man, if we can just get here, like we're gonna make it. Like 1 year with a child is like, yeah, we're made it past a lot of the infant things. Then they're going to school, and then the next thing. So for you, it's like you're growing up this tree to like send off into the world, being with very low maintenance of like you're on your own, like you're gonna make it.
Yeah.
Timeline, as we're talking, I mean, you're sending seeds in mailboxes, right?
Yeah.
How long do you think it's going to take for us to get to that 2%, which is a high percent, full range Ozark coverage of the Ozark Chinquapin back to its former glory?
Had you asked me that question 15 or 20 years ago, I would have said centuries. Now I don't know, because I'm seeing things with social media where people are catching on with this stuff. I see folks sending in pictures. They're looking for the trees. They're growing the trees. They're sending me pictures of trees they are growing that are now 8, 10, 12 feet tall, producing nuts. I don't know. I think if everybody really does say, I want to be a conservationist and I want to pick this project as one of my big deals, who knows how fast we could get it done. And I don't know that speed is necessarily the goal, but at the same time, I don't want to lose the species, and I don't want to wait because we're taking too much time. So people are getting more engaged constantly, and it's a good thing. There are nights that I will spend 2 to 3 hours just responding to Facebook comments, because that's how much you do a post, and boom, there's a big hit.
Yeah.
And then I spend a lot of time answering questions. Well, the same thing happens on our website. When I do a post on Facebook, all of a sudden our website gets hit quite a bit, and we get a spike in membership applications, which is a very good thing for us.
Yeah.
And we're pretty conservative. We really don't use a lot of that money for anything other than the research, the travel, the coolers, the materials we need to do the experiments. All of that is being provided either through donations, grants, or membership money. It's pretty lean, and I would even dare to say it's a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
So if you get on there and you decide you want to donate more than $30 for membership, God bless you.
Yeah.
Glad to see it.
Man, that is cool.
Yeah.
It's really refreshing to hear from people like you who have a passion for returning a species back to kind of where it should be and where it has historically been. Because a lot of times you just take for granted, like, okay, this is how things used to be. This is how it is now. There's a blight. We can't really do anything about it. Oh, well, that stinks. We should have tried to do something 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and never brought the Chinese Chinquapin over. But
Yeah, it's like that. I wish my grandparents would have cared.
Yeah.
Like that.
But
yeah.
now it's like it's a really optimistic, like even talking to you, you seem optimistic about this actually making a big difference to the point where like we can do this and there is something to be done and we're doing it right now.
Yeah.
Is there any risk? Like at this point, it feels like there's enough people bought in where it doesn't really feel like there's a risk of losing the tree. It's just a matter of like how much time it takes to get it back. Would that be accurate, or is there a real risk of like if we don't get people on board, we could actually end up losing it still?
I think that's still possibly. Right now, the tree is functionally extinct. And what that means is they live, but they are not actively reproducing at a point where they could be sustained through a forest. Right now, we have a few orchards. If you had a natural catastrophe run through some of our nut orchards, I'd be devastated. I would be devastated. That would really bother me, and it would bother a lot of other people. It's one of those things that the more we do, the better off we are. It's as simple as I could state it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I didn't realize they were functionally extinct. That's news.
Which is interesting because even though they are on the landscape, the blighted ones, the ones that have tree stumped or they stump sprouted,
Or even the healthy ones,
still yet they are functionally extinct. Is that recorded somewhere where there's some governing body that says this tree is extinct, this species is, like, who says that?
There's some discussions about that. I know with our agency, we look at species of conservation concern and we put them on a scale of it's an S1, S2, S3. And I want to say the Ozark Chinquapin, I'd have to go back and look because it may have changed, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of an S1, S2 or S3.
Okay.
And essentially they're saying, well, they're still out there.
Okay.
Well, they are, but they're not breeding. They're not self-sustaining. The only reason they're still there is because they can absorb enough nutrition into their roots to stump sprout and keep living, but they are not reproducing through flowering means.
Gotcha.
So that makes it really tough on the landscape.
Through natural processes. Okay.
So this really is, it's a small wave that's growing, but it really is starting from, they're not going to come back unless we actually help them along.
That is it.
See,
if people don't get involved,
That is key.
they're doomed.
That's key. That's up there with the black bear in Arkansas and the wild turkey in Missouri.
Yeah.
Of like, we're not going to have this. We're not going to be able to interact with this wildlife anymore unless we step in and do something about
you mentioned those, and those are the conservation stories decades ago.
Yes.
That was the conservation story of my grandparents and my parents. This tree right here, this is my conservation story. This is our conservation story. And all you have to do is look for this tree. It's as simple as that. You hike, you camp, look for the tree, report it. You don't have to have property and grow them, but if you do and you can, all the better.
Yeah.
Get involved. If you get involved, you are part of this conservation story.
Oh, I love that.
That's so accessible too for just the average person who maybe they don't even hunt. It's like they hike and they float the buffalo.
Yeah.
They're down there on the buffalo, aren't they?
Yes, and we found some in the valley, which is a lot lower in elevation than we expected them.
Okay.
So yeah, these trees have still got surprises in them that we don't know about.
So you can really find them just about anywhere.
Yeah.
So pretty much anybody can get involved. You can sign up or you could just help look for them.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you, and hopefully this ties in here. I want to go back a little bit because I know you've got some firsthand documentation.
Yeah.
We love cultural significance, historical significance of the Ozarks, and it just as guys like us who our families have lived here for a long time. A lot of people who live in the Ozarks, their families have been here for a long time. Connecting back to our roots and families and just the stories that get shared, oral tradition is super important, and you can learn a lot about yourself from historical customs and things that about people 100 years ago. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that like that trait in me is where that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd love to go back. I know you've got some quotes here, some stories maybe, and just read through some of these that you've pulled up here that you
Sure.
guys have collected over time.
Okay, this one is from Harold Adams. He was about 80 some odd years old when he gave this quote to Stephen Bost, who is the president and founder of the Ozark Chinquapin Foundation. He states, "The Ozark Chinquapin nuts were delicious, and we waited for them to fall like you would wait on a crop of corn to ripen. They were that important. Up on the hilltop, the nuts were so plentiful that we scooped them up with flat blade shovels and loaded them onto wagons to be used as livestock feed or to eat for ourselves and to sell. Deer, bears, turkey, squirrels, and a variety of other wildlife fattened up on these sweet crop of nuts that fell every year. But starting in the 1950s and 60s, all the trees started dying off. Now they're all gone, and no one has ever heard of them."
Couple things there. One, you're right. The fact that today they were so prevalent then, and now today so very few people have heard of them is crazy to me. Like, it shows the shortness of our generational memory of, like, it was so prevalent to where they were everywhere. Our grandparents knew about them. The old timers knew about them. But, like, how many people our age, Kyle, know about these trees?
Not many. I mean, it's as crazy as saying, let's pretend your grandkids don't know what an oak tree is. And you'd sit here today going like, that's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
No, but like,
Yeah.
of course.
That's
they
a
know
good
what
way to
tree
put it.
is. But that's what's happened.
That's wild. The other thing that stood out to me there is just the sheer amount, the generosity of this tree to drop that many nuts to where you could go in with a flat blade shovel and put it onto a flatbed truck or trailer and load it to go feed your hogs. Like, that was the economical way of doing it because there were so many nuts.
Let me read this one from Tino Burnett. Tino was he's a member of the Cherokee Nation over in Oklahoma. Okay. All right, so he says, "I remember the trees when I was a kid growing up in Oklahoma. I used to walk in the woods with my bare feet. My skin was tougher then, but I'd step on those burrs and boy, would it hurt. They are the sweetest nut you ever did want to eat. I remember a tree back in 1963 that was just loaded with them chinquapins. They grew on a hillside down a gully and on the bank of the creek. They just grew all over the place, but not real abundant. In Oklahoma, the biggest ones I saw were 7 and 9 inches in diameter. I would love to see another chinquapin before I die, but I don't know if I ever will."
Wow. So he talked about the burrs on them. Is that just a mechanism of defense that tree has developed over time? Is that the belief on that?
Oh, yeah. This is something that unless you are a black bear or you are a crow or a blue jay, you're probably not going to get those nuts out of there unless it rains on them. We have found out that once it rains on them, the burrs get just soft enough
Soften.
that you can get in there and start working on them. And bears, I think they'll just eat the whole thing, burrs and all. And
they
I
don't
think
care.
that cannot be good on your gums, but more power to them. And it's very effective. And it's one thing that's really distinctive. When I hear people say, "Oh, I've got a chinquapin oak," I try to be polite. I'm glad they're interested. But are you talking about an oak or are you talking about a chestnut? Because that spiny burr is very distinctive.
Yeah, you would know if you saw that.
Yeah.
And felt it.
Yeah, it's very distinctive.
How do you guys remove the seeds then? Do you wait for a rain or like, because this would be, I mean, you couldn't do this with your bare hands, so you guys must have some efficient way to do this.
Welding gloves. Or if we get them green, sometimes we have to get them green just because we've got to beat the squirrels. We have to.
Okay.
So when we do that, we will take pliers and kind of pull things apart and welding gloves. I will tell you that even leather and welding gloves are not 100% perfect for keeping those spines out of your hands. I will go home and I'm like, I need to dig that out with a pocket knife. And that's just part of the fall. That's just part of it.
Gotcha.
How would the deer eat them if you're saying, would
Oh,
they
they
wait
wait.
on a rain?
If you go over and you shake the tree,
Uh-huh.
it'll rain chinquapins.
Got it. They're not falling out of the tree covered in spines.
Yes and no. I mean, it does both. So yeah,
sure.
if you shake the tree, I'll have nuts on the ground. If I want to put a blanket or a tarp down or something, I can collect a lot of those nuts as they fall.
Okay.
Because once they hit the ground and they hit a rock, they shoot off in directions you're never going to find them. But we are seeing in some of our orchards, those seeds are starting to come up on their own without our planting them. So that's kind of the cool thing about this. I've been studying crows and blue jays, and they will take some of these seeds up to 5 miles away. So they can help you plant these trees in ways that you would never expect. Now, squirrels do the same thing, and we're all familiar with a forgetful squirrel as a forester.
Sure.
All right, so crows and blue jays do the exact same thing, but they will go further. And they are so paranoid, if they think another bird saw them bury that seed, they'll take it somewhere else. And they only recover about 1 out of 4 seeds that they bury. So they are planting new acorns and chinkapins. And so we're starting to see those in the forest nearby away from our chinkapin plots, which I think is pretty cool. That
is
means that we're
awesome.
starting to get natural reproduction
Yeah.
around that site. But it took us about 10 to 15 years to get there. Okay, so that's kind of what you're looking for. And we keep putting trees on the side, and we keep cutting other trees so that we can preferentially plant Ozark Chinquapins. So it's work. I don't want to shine somebody on. It's not something where you plant 5 trees and ta-da, you're done.
Yeah.
No, you need to keep at it for a while, especially if you're trying to bring it back on your property. Now, once you get about 20 to 30 trees going, yeah, it's going to pick up speed.
You're feeling good about that.
Yeah, that's starting to work good.
In some ways, I think, like you're talking about, you'd want to kind of start at like an epicenter and grow out from there. At what point, though, and a guy who I'm hearing you talk about managing a property or surrounding area, at what point do you say, like, okay, I have hit my limit of chinkapins on here. I want to maintain biodiversity. At what point do you then pick up with the foundation or someone else, pick up and like, okay, we need a new site because this one now has gotten to a point where we've saturated this area. Have you gotten there yet? Or?
We have not, but
Okay.
it's going to be a good problem to have. And it's the same thing that every property manager deals with. I've got a piece of property where I'm not growing chinkapins. I do have too much clay on it. Well, I'm trying to make sure that I keep some of my elms and my ash and all that, but I'm trying to figure out what's the right balance here for white oaks, and I want my red oaks, and I want some of the black gum, and I want some of the cedar thickets over here for this purpose. So I want all of that on there, so I have to make that decision, and it does have to do with my values. So I'm looking for hunting species. I'm looking for a lot of bird species that I'll never hunt in my life. Cedar waxwings, for example. I'm looking for thickets that they can eat all kinds of berries. So I want stuff that maybe the deer's going to eat, but maybe the berries are really going to be good for a particular bird species, or it's really good cover. So your goals mean everything to you, and how I manage my property might be slightly different than how you would.
Sure.
Let's say you're really just into deer and that's your big thing, but for me, I'm into that biodiversity. I want to make sure that I've got a much stronger ecosystem on my property if I've got anything to say about it, and then to me, that makes the deer stronger. So, but that's my goals. That's how I handle that.
Got it. That makes sense. And I think that, the importance of biodiversity is you do build a resilience within that area, that property, or whatever you're talking about, to, potentially a new disease comes in and it wipes out all of that tree, but now you've still got all these other beneficial trees on that landscape, or something could happen to, this animal that helps this tree grow, and now that animal's gone, so that tree's not growing as much anymore. Like, it does create a lot of resilience.
There's actually research to back up exactly what you just said. There was
Okay.
a couple of prairies up in Illinois they were looking at. One was a smaller one with a lower biodiversity rating, and another one was much larger with a very big biodiversity. There was a massive drought that came through, and then they looked at that same prairie site the next year. The small one lost species, the big one did not.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what that is saying is there is something to these relationships that we may know or we may not have any clue how important that fungus is to that root, to that beetle, to this bird that eats the beetle. I may not understand it, and we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
So that biodiversity is so important, and when you're focusing on that, you do make a much stronger system on your property, or if several of you are doing it in a conglomerate, you're just benefiting each other by doing that. And I know that QDMA does that kind of stuff where they try to look for management units and things like that, but it's all cooperative, and if you get into that kind of stuff, there's a lot of benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let me read this here from Al Knox. He was from Rogers, Arkansas. He said, I took chinky pins to school. The more you had, the more popular you were. A pocket full of chinky pins was a good thing to have. When the teacher wasn't looking, I would roll them on the floor so they bounced off the blackboard up front. I was pretty good at it, too, because I never did get caught. The nut was easy to crack with your teeth. You would just bite the nut in two with no need for a nutcracker. Bite them in two. You never wanted to look at the other half, though. Sometimes the other half had a worm.
And that's the weevil you were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And if you can rub the seed on your jeans, or if you just bake them, something like that, you'll kill that egg, and then you won't have to worry about that worm developing and then coming out of there.
Oh, and when you say rubbing it on your jeans, you're talking about friction, like creating enough friction to put heat in there.
Just do that. Rub it off, because the weevil is putting the egg. It bores down in there, lays that egg, and then it's really just right on the surface, right in here.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get that knocked off, you can have that very successful and not have to worry about those weevil eggs.
Gotcha.
Here's one of the fences. The trees were 20 inches to 26 inches through. They were large. Dad used a hammer and a wedge to split the trees. He sharpened one end and used a sledgehammer to drive them in the ground. We put fence wire up on those posts. Some of them are still here yet today. And that is something I've verified. I know some individuals that they still have a fence that has Ozark Chinquapin wood, and it was put up in the 1940s.
Really? Oh, my goodness. Talk about some resilience.
Now, here's one that I don't know if you want me to read the whole thing. This one has to do with the leaves curing whooping cough.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
Medicinally.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this one is from Kenneth Ruark. He was born in 1934 in southwest Missouri. My 1-year-old baby girl had a whooping cough and coughed so much it made her eyes bloodshot. My 4-year-old son was sick and in the hospital, and we were scared he was going to get the whooping cough too. Whooping cough is caused by a virus, so antibiotics won't touch it. The doctors were trying everything, so my dad came over to tell me what to do. He is a Cherokee. He began to tell me nothing would work. Dad said, I didn't come over here to listen to you. I came here to help you. Now, go out and get some Chinquapin leaves to make a tea. Dad told me to collect Chinquapin leaves and boil them to make a tea. It'll be bitter, so add some honey. Each cough stick a spoon of, each cough stick a spoon in their mouth. So in other words, he was having them just give this to him constantly. I said it was winter and the trees didn't have leaves. Dad told me, there you go, trying to tell me instead of listening. Now go out and find those new shoots, and the leaves didn't fall off. You'll know how to get them, and it's right. I brought these leaves back and I began to boil them. So these are the ones that didn't fall off, like a lot of oak trees, so they do the same thing.
Okay.
So I brought those leaves back and I began to boil them. We had a white granite stir, enamel coating, and those leaves left a stain up to the water line that nothing would take out. I tell you that I gave it to my daughter and son both, and in 2 hours her cough turned around, and he never did get whooping cough. My dad said it was an old remedy that came out east with chestnut leaves, and a chestnut relative it'll work the same. That was our cough medicine for years after. If you stored it with sugar and honey, it might have fermented.
Wow.
Yeah. And there are some indications that the chestnuts do have something in there that is good for treating coughs.
Okay.
So there's a lot of stuff like that out there that we don't know how effective it is. Sometimes in the past, those kind of things were looked at as folk medicine and not really worth looking at real seriously. People are starting to rediscover that there might have been something to this, and it really does need to be at least examined, see how you could make use of that.
Yeah.
So if we lose this species, we lose a pharmacy,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
And I know the tree was used for making quinine substitutes, and then people would even use it for coffee substitutes and things of that nature. So there's a lot of stuff. And I've made tea with it. I'll take it to our Ozark Chinquapin Foundation public meetings and let people drink it. And I get requests, can I have some more of that? Well, I'll give you what I've got left. Here's a couple bags. And it's good. It's got a nice light flavor, and it's nice.
Yeah.
And it's renewable. I'm not doing anything bad to the tree by collecting the leaves.
Right.
So even after a storm, if a bunch of leaves get off because of the hail, well, I pick those up, I dry them out, and then I use them for tea.
Bundle them up, make some tea.
What's
That's
it taste
right.
like?
It's a light, it's an herbal tea, kind of like a green tea, but there's a little more to it. But it's not real astringent like you would expect a tea to be. You know how tea sometimes gets you get bad tea and it's kind of raw and
pretty bitter.
Bitter.
Yeah.
It's not bitter, which is what I would have expected considering how much tannic acid is in the bark and the wood. People used to tan hides with the bark, and it's very, very good for that. So
Really?
if you want a good vegetable tan, chestnuts and chinkapins are good for that.
What other uses have you guys found in historical records of what they can do with the nut as far as food, products that they can make, bark, leaves, and things like that?
Yeah, you're looking at pretty much the whole tree can be used except for maybe the pollen.
Okay.
That's the only thing I haven't really seen anybody use. But I know the bark has been used to make medicine, drinks, and dye. I know the burrs have even been used for dye and for fertilizer. I know that the leaves have been used for tea, medicine, and for dye work. The limbs have been used to make whistles. People have used the wood to make all sorts of things, bowls, rocking chairs, yokes. They've used it to make log cabins, roofing material, atlatls.
AJ, courtesy of AJ.
Yeah. So there's so much stuff that you can do. And I think that there's more that perhaps wasn't documented. I think the trench bowls are a good example of that. I did that because I saw the value in making trencher bowls, which is an Ozark tradition. You essentially get a limb or a log and you just hollow it out, and then you can use that for rising dough. You can bathe children. You can, depending on the size.
Yeah.
You can put nuts in there. You can put, things you've collected, berries or mushrooms or something like that. So I tried it. I thought, well, maybe it works well. Oh my gosh, it's wonderful. I've made trencher bowls out of a lot of different types of wood. It's one of my favorites. I mean, it's just, oh God, it's beautiful when you're working on it, and especially if it's green. If we could ever get to the point to where we could responsibly harvest Chinquapin wood, that will make a marvelous product.
I love that. You mentioned nectar earlier. Are you able to make honey, or are you finding honey that bees are taking the pollen from the Chinquapin?
They are. Okay, so I've looked into this. I actually really dug in it really hard. Apparently, the Allegheny Chinquapin makes a honey that is so bitter that most people won't even sell it.
Really?
It's so bitter. And if you take, for example, there's honey you can get from Italy, and it's chestnut honey. It has, initially, you taste it and you go, that's sweet. And then you get a coffee bitterness afterwards. It's not bad, but it's one of those that if you don't know to expect it, it might be something that would give you a little bit of a surprise. So I've let people try that, and you go, okay, so that's different. What is Ozark Chinquapin honey? We're trying to get a hive up there, but with some of the droughts we've had, that's hard on the bees and so forth. So we haven't been successful in pulling off a hive that has made some Chinquapin honey. So we can't say with definitive knowledge, this is what it tastes like.
Okay.
Now, my suspicion is it's going to have a little bit of bitter and a little bit of sweet. Is it going to be as bad as the Allegheny? I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm optimistic. But it might be like some of these other chestnuts, and it's got a little bit of an earthy flavor to it and just a little bit of a bitter aftertaste as a chaser.
Oh, man.
It's interesting that the bark and the leaves have so much tannins, and then that the honey might be bitter, because the nut itself is not bitter. It's not like biting into an acorn where you're just like, that's nasty.
Yeah.
When you're eating them, they're sweet. Like it tastes like it tastes like chestnut.
Yeah. Which is funny because I've never tried a chestnut.
Oh, I'm sure you have.
I don't think I have.
Around Christmas time or something?
You can find Chinese chestnuts. People will sell those, and honestly, there's enough of those out there. If you're looking hard enough, you'll find them.
Okay.
And then they are a little
Just
different.
On the landscape?
Yeah, you'll find them in the Ozarks. People brought those here in the 1880s, 1890s. So why we didn't get the blight first, I don't know. But they're on the landscape. In fact, I get some people will tell me it's way back in the woods, and I think this is a Chinquapin, and then they show me a burr that's 4 inches across. No, that's a Chinese chestnut. Whereas these guys are maybe an inch across, and they only have one nut in the burr, whereas a Chinese chestnut has 3.
Oh, okay.
But they're out there, and you can taste them. You want to score them and then bake them so that they get just a little sweeter. If you don't score them, they can explode. So you don't want that in your oven. And if you've lived with somebody else, trust me, you just don't want that. Ask me how I know that. But you don't have to do that to the Chinquapins. You don't have to score them.
Man, what a cool tree and what a cool
That's
nut.
awesome.
I love it. Well, I'm just super grateful that you've spent your time with us just talking about this tree. I want to ask you, why is this so important to you? Why have you devoted so much time and so many hours to this specific initiative?
Yeah. I appreciate you asking that. I'm a sucker for the underdog. I love ecosystems that are not doing quite so well. For example, fens. They get overgrown with trees. People let hogs in them, and they just get torn up. I like to see a healthy fen because of everything that grows in there. It's a water source for a lot of wildlife. But anything that's not doing well, I want to see it do well. So if there's something I can do about that. So on my particular property, I'm not just planting Chinquapins, I'm planting butternuts, which is a tree that's also suffering from a canker. I have some other species of concern. In Missouri, we have black choke cherries that are not terribly common. I have that on my property.
Okay.
So if I can do something to plant that, make it more common, provide the seeds to somebody else, I'm all about it. These Chinquapins, they need a champion. Well, okay, pick me.
Yeah.
But it's not just me. I'm trying to infect other people and say, look, you can do this too. This can be your tree. This can be your project. This can be your rescue mission. You can be a part of this. And it involves doing a little reading, doing a little work, and sticking with it. Those 3 things right there spell success for this Chinquapin tree. So get on the website. Take a look at the Ozark Chinquapin Foundation's website. Take a look at it. See if you like what we're doing. Take a look at some of the articles about past uses and see if that doesn't convince you this is a valuable tree. Look at the nutrition on the nuts. Look at how to plant the trees. Look at things that benefit this tree. Can you get involved in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just identifying the trees when you're out and about? And if you can do any of that, you're a part of this. And that gives me hope. So why do I get into this? I like an underdog, but I really like to see them succeed. I like to see them pull out and everybody, yeah, all the cheering. Yeah, this is working.
Yeah.
It's good.
I love it. One last question is in terms of telling people and convincing people that there is value in this tree, what have you seen most people gravitate to in terms of that's the thing that convinces them?
That's the thing. I'm not sure that I see one single thing. It's different for people. It could be, I want that nut to eat. It can be, I remember that tree and I want it back. I hear a lot of people that'll say kind of what Tito Burnett did. I don't know if I'll ever see another one. I'd like to see another one. So whatever memories they have, the connections they have with this tree, they want that back. I've even heard some of them say, I'd like to see my grandkids do that, go out and pick these seeds up. I think there are people that, like you talked about with the hunters, they're planting it primarily because they want to manage the wildlife they care about. There's nothing wrong with any of those reasons, but they're all related, they're all entangled, and they all make a difference.
Yeah.
As long as people will say, yes, I agree, it's got value. Now, what that is to you and me might differ a little bit. I'm not going to quibble with you about that. If you like it because of what it does for turkey, and you like what it does for deer, and I'm all about it because I want to eventually make cool woodworking projects out of it, aren't we all kind of really in the same boat?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think, too, having the multiple angles that you can take just shows that the value is that much more. Because if you had something where it was like, well, this is really only good for this one use. It's like, or really good for this specific bird. It's like, well, how many people really care about that specific bird or even know about that specific bird? But if you can, talk to the hunters, you can talk to the people who they're just historians, they're folklorists. If you can talk to the people who they value plant life and biodiversity and things like that, it just ends up that accumulated value aggregated across all those different groups adds up to a much higher level than it would be if it just reached one group. So
Yeah.
it is a really, really special tree. And I'm glad that there are people like you out there doing it, getting on the ground, finding them, trying to help them come back and make a comeback on our landscape. And man, I've had so much fun talking with you and really grateful for your time on this show.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I do consider it an opportunity because I get to talk about one of my favorite things, rescuing the Ozark Chinquapin tree. And we've got a lot of people that I've made friends with over the years that are doing the exact same thing. There's people in Northwest Arkansas all over the place that are doing this. Arkansas Forestry, Arkansas State Parks. We've got the Cherokee Nation. We've got folks here in Missouri, the Forest Service, the Park Service, the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, the Missouri Department of Conservation. We've got people all over the place that are involved with this. And that actually gives me a lot of encouragement as well because I know that that's going to stay on public land in a good way, but it's also something that people can put on their private land, and I think that has a lot of merit too. So with these two strategies moving forward, we've got a lot of opportunity, and you guys just being willing to talk about this is an awesome opportunity. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
You can count the Ozark podcast now on that list of people because Kyle's fixing to sign up live, I think.
Yeah, we're in full support. I was gonna go to the website here and just to show y'all how easy it is to sign up, I'm gonna head over to what's the website again for me here?
Ozark Chinquapin Foundation.
Okay.
And then on that home page, you'll see Become a Member. You click that little orange button, and then they will give you the information about it, and then you will have the opportunity to say, I want to be a member, choose your membership strategy, and then you can do your credit card information right there on the website, and you're a member. You're done.
Okay.
And you get some seeds sent to you in the winter.
Some seeds sent to you in the winter. Okay.
As you're clicking through that, Kyle, I liked what you said, probably mid-episode or so here about, the the black bear story of conservation, the wild turkey story, how this is our story. This is your story, the one that you're actually like actively engaged in to see happen. And that speaks to me in a personal level as somebody who wants to advocate for wildlife and wild places and wild things, and also just loves animals and want to see animals thrive, and I want to interact with them and all of that. But I feel like in the modern time, it is easy, especially when you see other people champion their thing on the internet or whatever they're doing. You're seeing it all over, to believe that everything's a problem, everything's an issue, and everything needs fixing, which isn't exactly the case. Or believe that everybody else is doing, they're doing something. They have their cause. What is mine? Or like, what am I going to get involved in? And I just get excited, to hear from young women and young men or guys and girls with young families who are like, well, I want to make where I live better. And if better means some new trees, some different trees, if it means the smallmouth bass or they're released and they're let go and they get bigger, or if it just means, Kyle and I were actually talking on the way down here, if it means leaving a patch of grass in your backyard to go wild for the butterflies, if that's all it is, but all of that added up, like if that's what's going to make the Ozarks that we love and we call home that much more biodiverse and interesting and honestly just beautiful, like that's what I want to do.
You guys are onto something.
That's how I want to live my life. And we talk about conservation a lot. We're into it. We're for it. We also know that we're for it for reasons that are beneficial to others and are also selfish. And I think that's totally okay.
Yeah, it is.
I want turkeys on my landscape. I want big bears.
Well, I'm real big on sportsmen. I feel like they support conservation in ways that are not just principle.
Mm-hmm.
They actually go out and they voted in excise taxes on their firearms, their ammunition, their sporting goods, and that's the kind of stuff that supports a lot of the activity that goes on in public lands. Well, that's the hunters and the fishermen saying, I want to be a part of this. I'm in, all in. And that's a fantastic thing. So if you have similar listeners right now, this is another opportunity for them.
This is it. As you guys are speaking, the 60 seconds, 2 minutes, y'all were just talking, signed up officially. So it says, thank you for your support. We just received to save and restore the Ozark Chinquapin tree. Our native chestnut seed from the Ozark Chinquapin are still very rare, and seed with resistance even rarer. However, every year we're able to ship seed with better resistance than the year before. No guarantees these seed are blight resistant. However, the parent trees were collected from the largest known living 100% pure Ozark Chinquapin trees that exist at the highest levels of blight resistance.
Yeah.
Sweet. So we're legit. We did it. So that's how long it takes. So if you guys are listening, now's the time. Go do it. Sign up, and let's bring the Ozark Chinquapin back.
Yeah.